How's it going, guys, and welcome back to BL3's Forgotten, the series where I take a look at underused and not often talked about pieces of gear to determine whether or not they deserve to be remembered within the modern meta of the game or should be left behind and forgotten. And today we are taking a look at the Shrieking Devil. If you'd like to get the Shrieking Devil for yourself, you're going to fast travel over to Desolation's Edge on Necrotafeo, specifically taking the drop pod fast travel station. From there, continue onward down the side of the hill until you hit the Catch a Ride save station combo at the bottom, where you can either grab a car or run your way over into this little alcove where the Blinding Banshee can spawn, who when killed can drop you the Shrieking Devil. The Shrieking Devil is a blue-rarity Maliwan shotgun able to roll with 2 of any of the elements, with the unique effect that shooting the Shrieking Devil creates an explosion at the location that it is used at, dealing splash damage not only to enemies nearby but the user themselves. The Shrieking Devil is also able to be charged for up to 1.5 seconds for extra range and damage. So just to immediately get it out of the way, this pretty much needs to be used purely with rad damage with a red suit effectively, otherwise you are going to be killing yourself. Because of how damage scaling in this game works, with weapons gaining a shit ton more damage with mayhem levels while your character's health doesn't increase, along with just how much more damage that you deal compared to how much damage you have to tank from enemies, the game isn't really balanced around you being able to survive your own damage. Most players are incredibly aware of this fact, so you need to have some sort of bullshit way to just completely negate this damage, and the best way to do that is by just only dealing radiation damage and a rad suit so that you don't hit yourself whatsoever. But this isn't just using a radiation Shrieking Devil, because BL3 has a lot of sources of additional elemental damage added to your weapons, either through ASEs, or speaking of Mo's, Skagden, or anything else that applies other elements to your weaponry you do not want to use if you don't want to be constantly killing yourself. And going into this, I really anticipated to kind of shit on this gun far more than I think I actually am going to. It is not a good gun by any means, do not get it twisted. But it's actually not as bad as it feels. Cause yeah, no doubt when actually using this gun, it doesn't feel like it does much other than kill you and tickle enemies. The amount of effort required just to keep yourself alive by using this weapon can't possibly be worth this damage output that the Shrieking Devil has. And yeah, it isn't. But it is fun, and it is a hell of a lot better than it might let on. This is a huge AoE blast zone when fully charged that, while it does middling damage to single target enemies, that damage is hitting literally everything around you. Per shot, the overall damage output here is actually pretty decent when you factor in that huge AoE and the amount of enemies that are being hit with that damage. And even though I was still going down a lot even with the red suit on, I was still able to make surprising amounts of progress into the intro of True Maliwan Takedown, even if it felt like I was doing jack shit with this weapon, and even if it was a bit slow. Like I said, it's not a good gun, it's just better than anticipated. We here at the Arachnica channel pride ourselves on incredibly low bars. Now of course, being a splash gun, funnily enough, it was actually very good on Mo's, holding up even into True Guardian Takedown. But the issue is that likely precisely the thing that makes it decent is exactly what also makes it unusable. Skagden, baby! You just simply cannot be immune to the self-damage when Skagden. I'm not sure there's any amount of damage reduction or fire resistance that would make you be able to tank your own Skagden, but I'd like to be proven wrong. Similarly, it's also quite unusable with Infusion. I went ahead and unspec'd it though, because surprisingly enough, it was also feeling pretty damn good on Amara, and then I quickly learned that it was precisely because of Infusion that it was feeling as decent as it was. Without, it wasn't great. Now there is one situation in which I think the Shrieking Devil actually has a place. One situation in which I think the Shrieking Devil is actually legitimately an incredibly good weapon and actually worth considering. One situation so utterly busted and easy to access that it can barely be called a build, where hopes and dreams and any useful discussion about builds go to die. One Borsplosion. The interaction that every day makes me wonder why I made a 10-part series talking about Zane when I could have just made a 20-second video saying Hustler Eraser, which probably would have ended up with infinitely less people arguing with me in the comments. But Borsplosion, Zane's Hustler Eraser interaction that infinitely dips splash damage and creates a recursive buttfuckery nightmare for your eyes and all the enemies on the field, creates an opportunity for the massive high damage AoE of the the Shrieking Devil to actually do an insane amount of damage and wipe out an entire fucking area of enemies. This weapon lets you go full Scorched Earth with the most Scorched Earth build that there already is, the likes of which not seen since August 9th, 1945. Genuinely, the Shrieking Devil is just absolutely cracked with this setup, and it will devastate anything within an obscenely large radius around you. Of course, as with anything Hustler or Racer related, it is a little bit inconsistent and relies on getting a little bit lucky with the recursive bullshit actually proccing with your crits, but given that this is such a high AoE, as long as there's enough enemies around, it's genuinely one of the more consistent weapons to use with it. This creates not only just a genuine use case for the Shrieking Devil, but a really fucking fun one, because like I was saying earlier, this is an incredibly fun gun if not for the difficulty of use and how kind of mid to just straight up bad it is. But Borsplosion interacts with it as favorably as you can possibly get for the Shrieking Devil, and lets you really enjoy this gun for what it is and what it can do. Overall though, the Shrieking Devil is a gun that is more likely to kill you than literally anything else. It requires a shit ton of investment for not a lot of reward, and while I think it is a little bit better than it actually feels to use given the very high AoE that it has and it being able to apply its damage in such a large radius, it's not as good as literally any slightly more meta option or even lesser meta options. That being said, within Borsplosion, it does have a place, and a very, very fun one at that. Therefore, at the very least, is a weapon I would recommend picking up just to play around with a little bit. That's about do it for this one though. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all that. I'll be live right after this video goes up, right here on YouTube and also over on my Twitch channel, where there'll be a link to down in the description below, and just under that is a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.